Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are stepping away from the usual headlines and policy papers. We're going to plunge headfirst into a really intense, brilliant, and let's be honest, a demanding piece of cinematic history. Ingmar Bergman's 1972 masterpiece, Cries and Whispers. So if you're looking to understand this film's place in history, its artistic genius, and, the huge critical discussion around it, you're in the right place. We've gathered a stack of sources articles on its themes, style, its legacy, and we're here to really pull out the core insights for you. Our mission is to give you a complete and, importantly, spoiler-free understanding of why this film endures. What does its deep psychological journey really mean?
And we have to start right there with that idea of a journey, because Bergman pretty much tells us how to watch this film from the get-go. All the material we have really defines Cries and Whispers as a work dictated by its focus on interiority, on deep psychological introspection.
So not a lot of external action then?
None, really. This isn't a story about people fighting battles or, crossing landscapes. It's about the geography of the human mind, the landscape of the soul.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The sources lay out the premise pretty clearly. We have three women, sisters, inside a single home, and they're grappling with illness, with death approaching, but also with memory and this huge emotional distance between them, all in one house.
And that setting is everything. The narrative method is deliberately unconventional. It's not the plot that drives things forward. It's the introspection of the characters. We're shown their memories, their internal suffering, not just what they say to each other.
And that allows Bergman to use that very controlled visual style he's famous for.
Exactly. It's his signature, and it gives the film this lasting power.
Now, when you look at the production hallmarks, there's one thing every single source brings up. You can't analyze this film without talking about it.
Yeah.
The color. Specifically, that pervasive dramatic use of red.
Oh, absolutely. The crimson.
Why is that so critical? I mean, why is that specific choice so integral to the film's psychological mission?
Because it's the visual key. It unlocks that interior world for us. Critics argue that the crimson, the walls, the drapes, that almost visceral red that just fills the screen, it's the film's emotional barometer.
So it's showing us how they feel.
It's making the unseen reality of their emotional pain physical. The sources suggest Bergman wanted to do exactly that. That deep red, according to different analyses, it symbolizes so many things. Blood, passion, memory, and, I think most potently, the internal bleeding of guilt and sorrow that's never spoken.
So it's not just a set design choice. It's literally a visual expression of their psychological state. It's making the anguish feel corporeal.
Precisely. If the interior life of these women were a kind of surgery, the red is the operating theater where their memories are being, cut open. It signals to us, the audience, that we're entering a space where the rules of external reality don't really apply. You have to read the visuals as deeply as the dialogue.
And speaking of reading beyond the dialogue, the sources also highlight the deliberate use of silence. It's not just empty space. It's a narrative tool.
It's an active silence, absolutely. And it often lasts for an uncomfortably long time. It demands that you fill that void. Bergman uses it to show the fundamental inability of these characters to connect. The sisters are right there, physically together, but they're emotionally galaxies apart. The silence is the sound of that distance.
That structural element, the confinement, plus that inability to speak. It seems like that's the mechanism he uses to force us to confront the core themes.
It is.
And what are those main existential concepts the sources say the film is built around?
Well, as you mentioned, it's emotional isolation, mortality, memory, and just the extreme difficulty of having an authentic human connection. It's a heavy list.
A very heavy list.
And Bergman treats it with absolute, unwavering seriousness. What's so fascinating is how he makes these abstract concepts visible. The film doesn't just talk about memory, it shows us flashbacks that break the timeline, proving how the past is still an active, painful presence.
That use of memory feels crucial because it helps us place this film in its wider historical context. The sources are very clear. The Cries and Whispers is a prime example of this big shift in post-war European cinema toward psychological exploration. We should probably define what that means.
It's a radical turn inward. I mean, think about the dominant film styles before this period. You had a lot of social realism, which rightly focused on external problems, poverty, class struggle, the physical scars of war.
Right. Big, visible societal issues.
Exactly. But Bergman and some of his contemporaries were making a different argument. They were saying that the trauma of the age wasn't just physical or political, it was profoundly internal. So the new focus became things like personal guilt, the breakdown of communication, existential angst. And Cries and Whispers is really a high watermark of this movement because it takes that interior life, the unsaid, the felt, the remembered, and declares it a subject worthy of monumental cinematic focus.
So the key argument then is this kind of revolutionary idea that internal suffering, the anguish from isolation and memory, can be just as profound as, visible social hardship.
Yes. And that's where its unique power comes from. It's a kind of democratization of pain, but in a way that could have been controversial.
How so?
Well, our sources mentioned that some early critiques questioned it. They wondered if focusing so intensely on the internal crises of these, relatively privileged individuals was the right response to an era still recovering from so much.
And how do the sources tend to counter that criticism now?
They argue that Bergman is making a case for the universality of emotional pain, regardless of class. The film strips away all external distractions. The world outside the mansion barely exists, to show that real misery comes from the inability to connect, from the failure to forgive. By confining them, Bergman makes that emotional distance the true agony.
It's inescapable.
It's inescapable. The house isn't a comfort. It's a manifestation of their shared yet separate memories. It's a psychological cage.
And this radical focus clearly worked, because we have sources that identify Cries and Whispers as one of Bergman's most significant works, a landmark of European art cinema. That's some serious critical weight that has lasted for 50 years.
It is. But this is where we have to balance that critical acclaim with the reality of actually watching the film. The sources are all unified in calling it unforgettable, but they also all note that it is not an easy-to-watch film.
Yeah, you definitely see that in the audience feedback. It's described as emotionally intense and deeply introspective. I saw one critic in our materials describe watching it as feeling like having minor surgery, painful but necessary.
That's a great way to put it.
And people call it unforgettable, but they also say it's cinema that demands patience and reflection.
That patience is the key, I think, because the film's importance lies in its unflinching stare into raw emotional pain. It demands you engage actively, not passively. Its success is in capturing these incredibly complex human states through this highly controlled, almost ritualistic artistry.
So if we tie this all together for someone listening, what are the, say, 3 key takeaways they need to have about Cries and Whispers?
Okay, first, you have to see it as essential for understanding that shift in European cinema. The moment the focus moved from social realism to deep psychological exploration.
Right, the turn inward.
The turn inward. Second, its mastery of controlled visual style. The crimson isn't just a color, it's a narrative device. The silence isn't empty, it's a weapon of emotional distance.
And the third point.
I'd say its lasting relevance is tied to its radical decision to make the internal landscape the main dramatic arena. It was a formal declaration that emotional distance, unshared memory, the dread of mortality subjects that are inherently non-visual could be turned into powerful, unforgettable cinema. It validated the interior life as a legitimate subject.
That discussion about silence and patience really sticks with me. And it brings us to our final thought for you. If Bergman successfully used that sustained silence as a narrative tool, demanding patience from us, the viewers, well, what does that imply about the necessary silence and patience required in our own lives? To truly confront our own memories, our own emotional distances. The title itself, Cries and Whispers, it invites us to reflect, doesn't it? Are we only relying on the cry, the loud external expression of pain, or are we brave enough to actually listen to the whisper? That quiet, internal, often unheard truth that the film forces its characters and us to finally confront. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a truly unforgettable piece of art. We hope this knowledge serves you well.